right. Well, Dwight, I think I'm going to lead us off here. We've got
Okay.
14, 15 people, but let's say it's 6:30, so let's
Yeah.
get rolling. I have a feeling we'll have a few more joining in here, but so good evening, everyone. My name is Josh Mancy. I am the current District 6250 Foundation Chair. Tonight we'll be covering the third grant management seminar of this spring. We also have Dwight. Hey, Dwight, you want to introduce yourself quick?
I'm Dwight Haney, member of the Rotary Club of Fort Atkinson, and I will be the District Foundation Committee Chair starting July 1st. Welcome, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwight. We also have Liz Evans, our District Grants Chair, on the webinar here tonight as well. So she'll be helping us monitor the chat. One thing we do ask, if you are here representing your club, could you please put your club name in the chat? We want to make sure you guys get attendance for attending, because that is one of the requirements of a district and global grant, is that someone from your club has attended a GMS yet this year. And then Liz, it looks like we are not, Morgan Data is not keeping attendance. So Heather, is there an option to export the chat or get it out so that we can kind of copy and paste out who attends? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Rotary District 6250. I don't know if that's you, Heather, on one of your multitude of laptops or whoever it is, but thank you for that. All right, so Dwight and I are going to kind of pass this back and forth tonight. I got my second COVID shot, so earlier this morning, so I would say that I'm not quite feeling up to my normal energetic self. So I appreciate your patience. Thanks for being here on this beautiful summer night. We are going to try and move along to get you guys out and enjoy the day. So as we go, if you have questions, please type them into the chat and we will do our best to answer them. As for those who have not been participating in district conference very much, we are up on stage. So at this point, we're probably not planning to invite people up on stage to speak, but if we do have something at the end, we can always have a little bit deeper discussion. So with that, I think, Dwight, you got a thumbs up. Does that all sound good? All right, well, let's get going. Oops. If I can. All right, so today's goals, we're going to talk a little bit about the Rotary Foundation. We're going to talk about District 6250. We'll talk about some eligibility requirements, and then we're going to talk about global and district grants. So there may be a little repetition on the Rotary Foundation if you joined us last night. Hopefully you're back and ready to go after a great evening of Rotary presentations yesterday between membership and foundation. So the Rotary Foundation motto and mission: to enable Rotarians to advance world understanding, goodwill, peace through the improvement of health, support of education, and the alleviation of poverty. So I think that sums up in a much shorter fashion the mission of Rotary than I could if someone asked me that question independently. So where does the money come from for our Rotary grants? It comes from Rotarians like all of us on this call, and it comes through donations to the annual fund, which is also known as the SHARE program. We're going to use a term tonight, DDF, which stands for District Designated Funds. And those are the funds that are given and then come back to the district that we use for global grants, district grants, global grant scholars, and potentially other uses as well. But we'll get deeper into that. We just wanted to make sure everybody knew what DDF stands for. So 3 years ago, in 2018, 2019, if Dwight had given $2,000 to the Rotary Foundation, it would have been invested for 3 years by Rotary International. They have professional money managers and fund investors that look to try and invest in reasonably safe assets while still earning a little bit of a return. What we really are trying to do is make our money work a little bit for us. After that 3 years, half of that 2,000 or 50% would have come back to us in district designated funds. 1,000 of it would have gone to the World Fund, which supports projects around the world and matches our district designated funds. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Any extra that's made through the investment will go towards administration and endowment, which is one of the great ways that our foundation is able to keep its costs low, is through making our money work for us 3 years before returning it to the people in project, the people who gave it to do do the good work that we do through matching. Of that $1,000 in district designated funds, up to $500 can be used, or 50%, for district grants. We also in District 6250 match dollar for dollar on global grants. And we'll talk a little bit more about matching as we go forward. There's also opportunities to use DDF for other programs such as Polio Plus, Peace Centers, Ambassadors, Global Grant Scholars, etc. So for those of you who don't know, I would highly recommend going out and Googling Charity Navigator. What Charity Navigator does is they evaluate charities from around the world, and they look and basically they measure on transparency and effectiveness of the charity. So how well is it explained where the money goes and what the money is spent on once it's donated? And then the effectiveness is how much of the actual funds get to the end cause or goal of that charity and those donations. So what you'll see is organizations that have low overhead, low administration, low fundraising costs do very well. You also find that there are charities there are charities that are very transparent. They fill out all the paperwork. They explain very clearly where the money goes, how it's spent, and where it ends up. So what you'll find is Rotary International is one of the top charities in the world, or our Rotary Foundation of Rotary International is one of the top charities in the world. We've earned 4-star rating for, I believe, 10 or 11 years in a row. So it's something that we are very proud of. And again, there's many organizations out there that are always asking for donations. So I highly recommend, if you're curious about Rotary, the Rotary Foundation, or any other large charity, go out there and take a look and see how it's rated. I believe most of our members are familiar, or at least have heard about, our areas of focus: peace and conflict prevention resolution, disease prevention, water and sanitation, maternal child health, basic education and literacy, economic and community development, and our newest and one of our most exciting, protecting the environment. So let's talk a little bit about 6250 grants. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to my comrade, Dwight.
Thanks, Josh. Go ahead and advance the next slide. So when you think about getting involved with the grant process, there's a few requirements, and this checklist is a real important piece of this process. We'll walk through each of these ideas so you're clear about the understanding of what is here to be qualified. So tonight, your attendance of one of your club members, doesn't matter what title they do or don't have in your club. We just need one person from the club to attend a grant management seminar. This counts for your entire club today. That happens annually. So attending this year doesn't qualify you for next year. Each year, we ask that you attend the grant management seminar, especially to make sure you're aware of any updates that have happened since the past year. Your club president-elect needs to attend PETS or was excused by the district governor. Your club should know that. Your president-elect should know that. We need $100 average per capita giving to the Rotary Foundation Annual Program Fund. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail on a future slide, but reaching that goal goes back to where the DDF comes from. Our giving as Rotarians to the annual fund makes these grants possible. So what we do is we are encouraging our clubs that you need to reach this level of giving. There are some ways that, some exceptions to that, and as I mentioned, we'll talk about that at a future slide. There's a memorandum of understanding. We'll look at that on a future slide as well, but we need to have your signed memorandum of understanding. There is one for the Rotary Foundation. There is another for District 6250. It's an addendum. And then the primary applying club needs to be current on all prior grants. That's global grants or district grants. What that means to be current is that you are meeting the requirements for reporting. So a district grant, you can apply this year, but if you had a district grant for the past Rotary year, if that report has not been turned in by the time our grant committee meets, you won't be eligible for a grant. So getting those reports in. With global grants, the grant may not be complete, but there are reporting timelines when you receive a global grant, and you need to be current on those reports. Go ahead and next screen, Josh. So two types of grants: global grants and district grants. Um, Global grants are larger grants. You see the $2 signs there. Um, Larger projects, $30,000 minimum. Um, so any project you have that's 30,000 or more could be something you want to get into the global grant process with. The reason for that is global grants have longer timelines. With our district grants, you are limited to the Rotary year for that grant period. Your project has to be completed within that time. Global grants can go on for long periods of time, as long as you're up to speed with your reporting. They need to have sustainable and measurable outcomes. That's a theme you'll hear regularly, regardless of what level of granting we're talking about at Rotary. Sustainable and measurable is really important. That's what keeps us with that Charity Navigator rating and earns the respect of people around the world for the Rotary Foundation. Alignment with the areas of focus. So with the global grant, there are now 7 areas of focus. And it's not hard to align a project with those areas of focus, but you have to be clear about which area of focus you're working in. We do offer a district match, so there's a $1 for dollar match for dollars given to a global grant project by District 6250 clubs. We do not match donations from clubs from other districts, but we will match. So your club, along with other clubs in the district who might be participating in the grant, we will match that. And then there's a World Fund match. It's currently, for those of you who are familiar, it's currently dollar for dollar with the district match. Beginning July 1st, it goes to 80 cents on the dollar of the district matching funds. So you need to be aware of that. That's a change. That's recently been announced, and you need to be aware of that as you think about funding formulas. Go ahead, Josh. Global grants also require a community needs assessment. And the idea behind a community needs assessment is the Rotary Foundation wants to be assured that this is, whatever your project is something that the community, the people living in the area where the project is taking place, wants. There are a lot of ways you can accomplish a community needs assessment, but there needs to be some sort of formal process, some sort of documentation about how the need was determined and to what extent the community supports this particular project. Involve an international partner. Global grants always require an international partner. So it needs to be a Rotary club from another country. It could be the Rotary club in the country you're doing a project. It's possible you have a Rotary club in the country of the project, but you have other partners for funding as well around the world. So that's an important piece of global grants. It is possible to do a global grant where the grant is coming back into the United States or District 6250. We actually have a global grant in process right now that our lacrosse area clubs are working on to establish a mobile medical clinic. It has to have an implementation plan. So we will look at your application and say, what is the plan to accomplish this work? Have they thought through the issues in order to be able to accomplish the goals they're establishing in the grant? And then maintain proper stewardship of funds. This is a really important piece. You're working with an international partner. Be clear about who's responsible for keeping receipts. If you don't have a receipt, the money was not spent in the eyes of the Rotary Foundation, literally to the penny. So it's really important to have a trusting relationship with your international partners to make sure that there is stewardship of funds done in deep detail. Go ahead, Josh. So some suggestions about project planning. You know, a 30,000 plus project usually is a pretty significant project, has some moving pieces to it. So what the Rotary Foundation and we recommend is form a 3-person grant committee for your global grant. Why? A few different reasons. One, it's possible that someone on your grant committee may end up transferring jobs, moving away from your area. You want to make sure there's more than one person that's knowledgeable involved in the grant. It's also an opportunity to bring people with other, different skill sets to the process of planning the grant. So maybe you have somebody who's real good with the budgets or the fundraising. Maybe you have somebody who's real good with planning the actual project pieces because they have some expertise in that area. Assign roles. So even working with your international partners, make sure you're very clear about whose role, who's going to accomplish what, who's got which roles. Make an implementation plan. We've talked about that a little bit previously, but having that plan about here's how we're going to accomplish this project, here's what's involved, is extremely important. Establish a budget. There needs to be a detailed budget. Not estimated prices, but when you go out, get quotes. Figure out what is the cost of doing the project in the place you're doing it. If for some reason materials can't be purchased locally, what does it take to get those materials to that place of that project? Is there shipping costs? Are there other considerations that need to be considered? Have a contingency plan. We do a lot of good planning as Rotarians. Sometimes the world doesn't work the way we think it's going to when you're going through a project like this. There can be unexpected little snags that come up, or once you get into something, you might have an idea and say, it might be better to do it this way or that way. Have a plan to understand what might happen if there were a natural disaster, if for some reason something happened in the community where your project is located. Think a little bit about how would we adjust if something came along, and then have a document retention plan. This is similar to the stewardship of funds. Make sure you've got somebody accounting for not just the funds, but also any contracts, any purchases, anything that goes along in the terms of those things. Make sure that you've got those things filed away so you can include them with your reports as necessary. Next slide, Josh. Creating a budget, so it's got to be realistic. There are a lot of Rotarians, both on our district global grant committee, who have experience doing a lot of different kinds of projects. The folks at the Rotary Foundation, they're looking to say, is this a realistic amount of money for a project that's being described here? Competitive bidding, you should always get more than one quote when you're looking at purchasing services, for a contractor to do labor, whatever that might be, you need to have competitive bidding. Part of the reason our foundation is so respected is that it is known that we aren't just going to do, hey, my buddies are Rotarian, we'll just do business with them. We need to make sure that our funds are being used most efficiently and for the most impact possible. Reasonable prices, I think that goes along with realistic. And then disclose conflicts of interest. Again, there could be a variety of things that are there, but maybe you are doing business with a Rotarian from a club in the project area. That's okay, but it needs to be disclosed that that's the case. Next slide, Josh. And then setting goals. These are words that you're all probably pretty familiar with from your business lives when it comes to goal setting. Something measurable, sustainable. That sustainability piece is a really big deal. With a global grant, one of the things that's really important for everybody to understand is how will this be sustained after the fact? So you're putting a water system in a community. Who's going to take care of that system once the project is built? We don't want to just throw a Band-Aid on some need in a community, we want to make sure we're doing things with long-term impact. How are you going to measure the quality? How do you measure quantity in terms of number of people impacted? Make sure you have some baseline data too. That could be part of your community needs assessment. There could be other aspects to that depending on your project, but get some baseline data so you can show what the improvement was. And then know what your methods of measurement are. That's asked for in the global grant application. How are you going to measure success for this project? Next slide. So the global grant application is done through the Grant Center at my Rotary. It's only done online for global grants. It's really not too hard a site to navigate. Once you get something started, you can set up an application and you can work on it. You can come and go from the application. You can work on it. We always recommend when you're far enough in your planning to say, yes, we're going to apply for a global grant, start populating that application. The advantages to that are, one, it helps you be aware of all the requirements in the application. And two, once it's out there, there are a select few people, both at the district and at the Rotary Foundation, who can actually look at your application. If you have questions about how to do something, we can see what it is you're doing and give some advice, some guidance about how to update that. The online application walks you through step by step, and it's relatively intuitive to follow through on that. Next slide, Josh. So reporting requirements. So there is a timeline for reporting with a global grant. Progress reports have to be submitted every 12 months. Within 12 months receiving the first payment, and then it's every 12 months after that. Some projects can take 2, 3, 4 years, but over that period of time, the Rotary Foundation, in return for these grants, asks, keep us abreast of what's happening with your project. Let us know what's happening. And then once your project is complete, the final report is due within 2 months of completion. That's the place where you're going to have to account for all the use of funds, submit the receipts, provide a report, tell us the story about what did you accomplish and how did it make a difference in the world. And it does, even though it's in your application, talk about the sustainability component again in your final report. Next slide, Josh. And then here's some reporting requirements too. So how are your partners involved? What's the activity? How did you meet the project goals? How would you evaluate that? How area of focus goals were met? Speak to that in your final report. How the funds were spent, and then it's that data. How many people benefited? How did they benefit? What difference does it make in their lives? In reality, these grants are not just about a water system. These are about improving the quality of life of people in the community that the project serves. Next slide. So global grants process best practice. Here's a recommended best practice, and it works really well. Start off with a short summary of your project. Cover those high-level items. What's the project? Who's going to benefit? What will the end result be? Get it to Josh. Currently, Josh, it'll be me following as of July 1st. Send it to us. Let us know what you're working on. Why? There's a few reasons for that. One, it's good for us to be aware. If we're aware you're working on an application, we can help assess what kinds of funds are available for matches. We can also help point you towards the right resources at the Rotary Foundation or other people who might be able to help guide your process if you have questions. We have a number of volunteers at the district level who would be real happy to share their knowledge about global grants or certain types of projects or working in certain areas, and we can help you connect with those people. we want to make sure, just make sure before you put all this effort in that everything does align with the Rotary International guidelines. Then you can start, once we say, yeah, this is a go, then start work on your planning, your budgeting. And then in the calculator, there's within the application area, there's a grant calculator that you can start plugging in numbers and see how your budget would work in terms of how much money do you need to raise in order to reach this project total based on the different matches that are available from the district and from the World Fund. Once you've got all these things figured out, you can submit a completed draft application to the grant chair. Let us know. Our Global Grants Committee will have somebody take a look at it and go over it. We want to make sure your application's in good shape before you complete it, and we start having the people at the Rotary Foundation take a look at it. Once it's approved by your club and the district, we submit to RI, and they will do further review. Their job isn't to shoot you down. Their job is to just help you polish it up and fine tune the things that work best for the Rotary Foundation. And then once you've received approval, you can submit funds from the clubs that are involved, and those funds are released to the project for use to accomplish your goals.
I think we'll move past the Kahoot for tonight, right? And I can talk about district grants if you'd like.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you're all with us still. So far, we haven't lost anybody from what I can tell. So we've still got 19 people in our session. So thanks all for sticking with us. We appreciate it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about district grants here. District grants are smaller, right? They're for projects or sections of projects that are for less than $30,000. We only do district grants once a year, whereas global grants are kind of as they are submitted. District grants can be local or international, so don't feel restricted just to doing district grants within your own community. We do consider them to be seed money versus repeated request. So that's going to come into how you phrase the grant application. For example, if you put in an application for a park project, what we don't, and we fund the project, we would have a lot of questions and concerns if the same application came in again the next year for the same exact thing in the same project or the same park. What we do ask is you phrase things carefully. So for example, if you were doing a large park project over multiple years, for the first year, write the district grant for the gazebo. And then the second year, come back and write a different district grant for the benches, all in the same park, but distinctly separate projects. The grant applications for district grants are not done, there's no electronic application. So we do have a PDF and a Word document that's stored out on the Rotary District 6250 website, which you can see here. For district grants, we do require a minimum match of $500, and we only go up to a maximum match of $14,500. We require all these to be proposals for district DDF, and the deadline is May 25th, 2021. So make sure, as Dwight had shared earlier, that your club is qualified. But you've already got one of the key steps down by being here tonight. The steps for the district grant process. Proposals are submitted to the Foundation District Grants Committee. They review the proposals in early June. We have to submit those proposals to Rotary International. They do another final review similar to global grants. But one of the key things, no expenditures can be made or supplies ordered for that grant until you have gotten approval from Rotary International. Otherwise, we unfortunately lose that ability to match. Once you're notified that your grant has been approved, projects can begin and we'll work to get you your checks. In the past, we love to come to your club in person or come with your assistant governor and present the check to you in person and kind of see your club and see how things work. But these days with COVID, that's changed a little bit. So we often are sending the checks in the mail, but we still like to come and talk to the club a little bit about district grants and the good work that you're doing with these projects via Zoom. So Once that, then you have about a year to work on it, and then all the project and report paperwork is completed by May 15th of the following year for the final report. So here's just a different view, a little more graphical view, where we review in May and June, and then you have basically the whole year to work on them, and then submit before that May by May 15th the following year. You might ask what projects are eligible for a district grant and what grant request checklist items are there. So normally when we do this project in person, we actually have a grant application open and everybody's got one in front of them in some nice fancy folders. So we're going to step through this a little bit though. Some of the key things that your grant application is going to require is a brief project description, right? We're not looking for a paragraph. We're not even looking for multiple sentences. Straight to the point. Often we'll have people who are so passionate about this project, this park project or whatever. They tell us all about this project, but they forget to tell us what the project's, what the specific thing that they're asking for. So make sure you are short and to the point, but also sharing the relevant information. There's a section for additional background information. We ask for important context only. We want you to describe the benefit to the receiving community, describe how the community involved. And one of the key things that we look for is how your club is involved and the sustainability and how that project's going to be maintained going forward. We need you to be specific. So just saying that the community will maintain the project going forward, unfortunately, isn't specific enough. You know, specific owners, how they're going to be able to fund that maintenance, and who's going to take ownership of it into the future. And just so you're aware, Rotary clubs cannot own any equipment or anything that is paid for with a district grant. We are donating or giving these projects to other organizations. So you can't go out and buy a, something that the Rotary Club is going to own and use going forward solely. So we ask, similar to what Dwight had mentioned before, we ask you to confirm that the benefiting community agrees that that is what they want. You hear stories about people who go in and say, gosh, you really look like you need books in your schools. Well, when you actually dig in and ask questions, the teachers say, well, what we really need are bathrooms in the school so that kids can stay here and they don't go home during the day to go to the bathroom and never come back. So it also asks how are current needs being addressed, asking questions to the recipients and people in the community, and what are some intermediate and long-term outcomes. We also ask you to talk a little bit about Rotary publicity. We're Rotarians, we're service above self, but it's also important that people see the good work that Rotary is doing in our community. Liz says, please be sure to use the 2122 application form, and 2 sentences max on that brief description. I can't emphasize it enough. We've gotten things that are a page long, and at the end we go, what a wonderful thing, but I'm not sure what they're asking us for. So we do ask for bid to quote maintenance. Again, detail, staying away from generalities and just sticking to the facts. We talked a little bit about sustainability, some projects that require training. If you're going international, what local infrastructure is available. You hear stories about, they bought tractors for people in Haiti to help them be more productive and develop economically. And they went back to visit, 5 or 10 years later, and they found the tractors rusting in the field because they couldn't get replacement parts. So that's something to be aware of, as well as customs, shipping, and exchange rates, especially in today's world where exchange rates seem to be ebbing and flowing quite aggressively at times. When you're turning in your application, we need a couple names. We need you, who's turning in the application, and at least 2 other contacts from your club. Similar to a global grant, we just want to make sure that if something happens, we still have somebody to contact and somebody to follow up with. Unfortunately, it does happen, and we've had situations where some life changes, and it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get a hold of someone due to those changes. When you do submit a district grant, if your club is going at it alone, we will only match up to $5,000. If you go and find another club, so if I said, hey, Dwight, would your club want to partner with my club and we can do a grant together? And if Dwight said, of course, we can together we could get up to $10,000 match. And if I went to Liz Evans and I said, hey, Liz, would your club and my club and Dwight's club like to work together on this project? We could get up to 14,500. This is really intended for us to build relationships and collaboration and partnerships with other clubs within our district. We don't, Rotarians, we can go it alone, but that's not where we do our best work. If you have a cooperating organization, we want a little bit more documentation about, are they in charge of implementation? Are they bringing technical expertise? Are they doing coordination? And so let's define a cooperating organization versus a receiving organization. A cooperating organization would be somebody who's actually bringing something additional to the project. For example, if you were putting in a playground and the city had agreed to do the installation of the playground and had brought in heavy earth equipment and things like that, that would make them a cooperating organization. If we were just going out and digging holes with shovels and putting trees in based on where the city told us to put them, that's not really a cooperating organization. That's a receiving organization. In our experience, the majority of organizations that we do these projects with are receiving organizations. It's relatively rare for the amount of district grants that we see a lot of cooperating organizations. Liz, is that fair? Well, awesome. If you have a cooperating organization, what we ask is you just document the roles and responsibilities so there's no questions of who's doing what, where payments are going, and timelines and things like that. It shouldn't be too hard, but it's just one of those that it's best to have it on paper because we have encountered situations where all of a sudden somebody understood their role to be different than what it is. Financial details, we're looking for a detailed budget. Start with your expenses, identify your specific sources of funding. We don't need to go down to the detailed budget of we're going to buy 43 nails and 13.5 pounds of concrete. What we do need is more than supplies or building materials. Usually, if you have a quote or a spreadsheet that details out, here are some of our big items, that's enough. We just want to be able to understand what is being bought. Does it conform with the Rotary rules, the Rotary Foundation rules? And do we have any questions or concerns about sustainability from that budget? So for every dollar given by our clubs up to that 14,500, if you have two partners, we will match on a dollar for dollar basis. So if you put in $1,000, we will match for $1,000.
Hey, Josh, can I jump in here real quick?
Of course.
We just had a good example of the matching and something I'd like people to be aware of. We had an example of a project for a district grant that's being proposed, included some money from the local Interact Club. That's fine that they're participating in the project, but as a district, we only match dollars that are attributable to a Rotary Club. Why is that? Well, it starts with where does the money come from? It's our Rotarians who give the funds to make this possible. So there's nothing wrong with including Rotaract, Interact, other Rotary entities. However, for matching purposes, we will only match the dollars given by one of our Rotary clubs in District 6250.
Yes, excellent. So I see a note from Debbie Fox Schrader. If two clubs are participating, do they each contribute? Do they each have to contribute an equal amount? No, they do not. So we like to see their buy-in from both clubs, but in theory, you could have one club that would, in practice, you could have one club that gives all of the money except for $5, and the other club only participates $5. But it's still building partnerships and bridges. So you do not have to contribute on an equal basis. Oh, Debbie, if you still have further questions, just keep going in the chat. So. Submission and reporting. So when you submit your district grant, we'll accept Word or PDF formats. Please do not send us JPEG images or cell phone images of your application pages. it becomes very challenging when we get a email with 10 images, or we get multiple emails with images on each. We try and piece it back together, but often things are upside down, backwards, and whole pages may be missing. It's pretty much inevitable whenever we get an email with a number of images on it, something's not quite right. So please, please, please send it back electronically in Word and PDF so it's legible, it's simple, and all the pieces are there with it. For reporting, start tracking your information required from the start of your project, how many Rotarians were involved, and again, to reinforce what Dwight had shared earlier, keep receipts for every penny spent. So we'll just chat through a missing receipt scenario quick. So if we had a local club that put in $1,000, the district matched for $1,000, so they put $2,000 towards a project. If after they did this project, they did not keep receipts for a $200 charge, half that, basically the equivalent from the district, must be repaid to the district. So we would be looking for that club to pay back that $100 back to District 6250, and then we have to pass that back to Rotary International. So we've got a couple examples of some reporting requirements. I'm not going to read this aloud. Usually what we do when we're in person is we kind of talk through and we look at some examples and kind of take some back and forth thoughts on it. But this is a really nice example of how they've worked closely together with the city and kind of how the relationship works. So they've got a lot of different people involved. So we'll just keep on going here. Since this stage doesn't really allow us to have a very strong back and forth, we're just going to keep going. Reporting requirements. Here's an example. Here's an example of a nice simple budget, but still effective in kind of sharing. Well, actually, no, there's some errors in here, isn't there? So in this case, we've got benches 5,000, install 2,000, and then we've got other miscellaneous costs and supplies for 1,000. That other miscellaneous costs and supplies, that's a problem. Similar to what I had said before, we need more detail than miscellaneous costs and supplies. The benches, the install, that makes sense. The other, we do need more detail. What you'll see is up top, there's a total budget of $8,000. Down below, we've got funding from the Rotary West Club for $3,000, and they're requesting a district grant for $4,000. Well, right off the bat, we've got a problem because the district grant is for more than the club is putting in. It should be equal. And you'll also notice that they're asking for $8,000 up above, and their funding only equals $7,000. So, again, please, Dwight talked about building a team before. It makes a lot of sense to have somebody who's good at numbers, somebody with experience with grants, and somebody who knows the project. Like, gather your team, gather your experts. It'll make life a lot easier for you. So if you have concerns or questions about how, let me step back. If you have concerns about how the District Foundation grants process works, we have a stewardship committee. We want to make sure that our Rotarians are confident in our process. You give an incredible amount in time, talent, and funds to our foundation. And we want to make sure that you're confident that your funds are being used in the best way possible, fairly and transparently. So we have a District Foundation Stewardship Committee who is available if there are concerns around this process. They work in concert with the grant committee. They assist in, normally we have a member of the Stewardship Committee on. They will look at the Memorandum of Understanding documents. They'll make sure clubs are qualified. They also do verifications of grants to make sure that the grants committee is checking all the boxes and completing their process correctly. We also look at conflicts of interest on the grant committees, and they also will do reporting, investigation, and resolution of any irregularities that someone feels may have occurred. So rest assured, we take the process and the quality and the transparency of our foundation and our use of district designated funds very seriously. So if you ever have any concerns about the process and feel that something is not operating right, please feel free to reach out to Dwight, myself, or our stewardship committee. So, Dwight, do you want to talk a little bit about the upcoming foundation committee structure?
Sure. So beginning in July, Karen Abear will be our district governor. As foundation committee chair, I work with the other district committee chairs and our district governor line. So keeps our organization connected with what's all the things that are happening within the foundation committee. We have a grant subcommittee. Liz Evans is responsible for the district grant process. She has a group of Rotarians who are volunteers who really enjoy reviewing grant applications. These are people who are very knowledgeable about the grant process. So think of that group as a resource as well. If you're working on an application, you could reach out and ask questions. We might be able to help connect you with some people. However, if you come to us the day before it's due, it's going to be limited as to what we might be able to do and respond. Polio Plus subcommittee is part of our foundation structure. Randy Sproul is a wonderful speaker on behalf of Polio Plus. He spoke last night in the foundation session for any of you who might be there. If that doesn't motivate you to think about the importance of eradicating polio, I don't know what else would do it for you. So we're real pleased to have that group. We have a fundraising subcommittee, and we have a stewardship subcommittee that we've already talked about. Next slide, Josh. Are the scholarship committees on this slide? No, I will mention too that we have committees who work with our global and peace scholarships as well. And our district is really active in both those processes. You'll learn more about that as we communicate about our scholarship recipients for the year, and more follow-up from those folks as well. There's a variety of resources listed here for you. I would say anything you want to know about district grants, especially, start with the District 6250 website. In the foundation header there's a lot of the documents, a lot of information is available right there. There's also an org chart for our different committee chairs and that sort of thing. You can feel free to reach out to me and I'll help connect you with the right people. Or if you know what your question is and you know which committee you want to talk to, feel free to be in direct contact with them as well. There are also a variety of resources on the Rotary International site. You can explore that site for ideas for some of the different documents they have available, manuals and things like that as well. There's just good resources out there. And next slide, Josh. So if you've got any other questions, please put them in the chat now. Here's our contact information. You can find all of our contact information on the District 6250 website as well. So that's a really great resource when you're trying to figure out how to get a hold of some of the people who are volunteering on the foundation committee. And, this is all about Rotary's mission. The grants are something we do because of the generosity, we're able to do because of the generosity of Rotarians. In the end, it's all about how do we build a more peaceful world? How do we improve the quality of life that our neighbors around the globe are living? We really appreciate your involvement with district grants, with global grants. It's something that really adds vitality to a club, and we are real happy to be resources to you as you go forward. So I see there's some questions coming up.
Sure. I see some questions about getting access to the slide deck. So, yeah, I mean, Jason, Betsy, they aren't on the district website at this point, but send me an email at mancy.josh@gmail.com, and I'm happy to share the slides with you. So, and if you, yeah. Any other questions? If anybody feels passionate, feel free to, apply to come up on stage too. Thank you,
We're
Heather.
always,
That makes
we're
a lot more
always
sense.
looking for volunteers across the foundation committee. If you find that the foundation is something that gives you some energy, you get excited about it, there may be opportunities for you to volunteer with our foundation committee at the district level as well. It's a fun group of people who are really passionate about what the Rotary Foundation helps us accomplish. So lucky you folks, you got the short version tonight because we don't have a lot of interactive option here. But again, if you do have questions, please reach out to us. We love to see your clubs get grants.
Yep. Yeah, we like to see the money out there doing good in the world. So we'd like to use it all up. So then we can talk about how we can get more so we can do even more in the world. So, but no, if no other questions, we appreciate your patience. And again, I apologize for not being my normal peppy self, but thank you, Liz. I appreciate that. But yeah, if any questions come up, otherwise PI, I'm sure public image is still going strong. If you guys are feeling passionate about learning some more, so. But again, thank you for everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Take care, everybody.